This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one country, one leader, or one night of violence. This is about something quieter and far more dangerous. What happens when a system learns it can move faster than truth? When force is applied before witnesses can gather? When the lights go out, not by accident, but by design? You are watching a modern state test, a simple proposition. If information disappears long enough, accountability never arrives. No speeches announce this shift. No laws are passed. It happens in hours, in silence, behind closed networks. And once that lesson is learned, it does not stay contained. If this feels distant, stay with me. Because the most important part of this story is not who is doing it. It's who is watching and what they are learning. If you want to understand how power is changing right now, quietly, this is where you start. And what comes next explains why this doesn't stop here. What actually controls this system now is not ideology, not legitimacy, not even loyalty. It is speed. Speed combined with opacity, the ability to act, erase, and reset before verification can form, before institutions react, before the outside world agrees on what just happened. Power used to depend on persuasion. Then it depended on force. Now it depends on timing. If violence is deployed faster than evidence can circulate, the system doesn't have to win the argument. It only has to outpace it. Notice what's missing here. No speeches to convince the public, no long justifications, just action followed by silence. This is why personalities don't matter. Leaders are interchangeable inside a structure like this. What matters is that the machine has learned a repeatable method: suppress, disconnect, deny, delay. By the time the signal returns, the outcome is already locked in. And once a system proves this works even once, the question is no longer whether it will be used again, but how much faster it can move next time. Because the next shift didn't happen overnight. It crept in unnoticed and felt almost normal. There was a time when violence created visibility, when repression generated images, headlines, pressure. That era is over. What changed wasn't the scale. It was the tempo. Before, force triggered exposure. Now, force is paired with delay. A pause engineered long enough to exhaust attention. The shift was subtle. Internet disruptions called maintenance. Security escalations framed as temporary. Information gaps blamed on chaos. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that felt like a line being crossed. But the result is profound. When people cannot upload, cannot stream, cannot confirm, reality fractures. Each hour without signal doesn't just hide events, it degrades memory. By the time images emerge, they look old. By the time numbers appear, they're debated. By the time witnesses speak, they're questioned. This is the most dangerous kind of change, the kind that doesn't feel like change at all. And once normalized, it becomes policy without ever being written. What you're seeing now is not an eruption. It's the consequence of that quiet adjustment, because eventually the system tests how far the silence can stretch. And when it does, the first real shock arrives. The shock didn't arrive as a single explosion. It arrived as a pattern. 2 nights, the signal goes dark, and the injuries change. Doctors notice it first, not analysts, not governments. The wounds stop looking like crowd control. They start looking like warfare. Machine gun fire, military-grade force, indiscriminate. Hospitals flood, then overflow. Not with rumors, with bodies. This isn't chaos. It's sequencing. Civil police withdraw. Another 4 steps forward. Heavier weapons, clearer orders. By the time the network returns, the system has already done what it needed to do. The outside world begins counting, but the counting starts late. Even the official numbers, the ones meant to minimize, quietly confirm mass death, and the real figures live only in operating rooms and morgues. This is not the story of those nights. those nights are a symptom. If you're still with me, you already sense that. Because the real question isn't how many were killed. It's what the system learned it could do while no one was watching. And what happens when silence becomes a weapon you can schedule. What makes this system work is not secrecy alone, it's distribution. Force is not applied everywhere, it's applied selectively. And the cost is spread downward. The decision travels through clean offices, through committees, through approvals that never touch a street. At the top, there is insulation. At the bottom, there is exposure. The ones who benefit are invisible. They keep power without appearing on camera. They never pull a trigger. They don't need to. The damage is absorbed by doctors forced into silence, by families denied funerals, by bodies counted late, if at all. And here is the mechanism that matters most. Once responsibility is fragmented, accountability evaporates. No single moment to prosecute, no single order to point to publicly, just a sequence of necessary actions. This is how modern repression survives scrutiny. Not by denying violence, but by dispersing it across time, darkness, and bureaucracy. And when a system discovers that this works, it stops asking whether it should. It starts asking how to scale it. Because the next test doesn't look like the last one. It moves faster, hits harder. And it doesn't wait for silence. It assumes it. It accelerates, no pause. No announcement, just compression. Arrests spike. Thousands. Names disappear into lists you never see. Legal language hardens. Protest becomes threat. Threat becomes treason. Trials vanish. Timelines collapse. Verdicts are implied before questions are asked. Executions are scheduled like maintenance, quietly, efficiently. At the same time, something else happens. Public space is inverted. State-approved crowds appear. Cameras return, but only where they're allowed. Support is staged. Opposition is erased. The message isn't subtle. It doesn't need to be, go outside and you may not come back. Stay home. And the system moves on without you. This is what acceleration looks like. Not more violence, faster resolution. Because once fear works, explanation becomes unnecessary. And while attention struggles to keep up, another clock is ticking. One outside the borders, one that measures response, and the silence it's about to break doesn't come from inside the system at all. You feel this part before you understand it, because this is where the system touches you. Not as an observer, not as a reader of headlines, but as someone trying to decide whether to speak, move, log on, or stay silent. Imagine measuring risk by bandwidth, by battery life, by whether a message goes through. Imagine knowing that being seen is dangerous, but being unseen is fatal. Families search without names, without lists, without time. Funerals become acts of defiance. So funerals are banned. Grief itself is treated as a threat because memory is contagious. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Systems like this don't rely on mass loyalty. They rely on millions of small calculations. You don't need everyone to submit. You only need enough people to hesitate. If this feels heavy, it should, because it's designed to be, if you're still watching, stay, not because this is shocking, but because understanding it is the only thing that slows it down. And the next movement proves this doesn't stay contained. What happens next is the part most people miss. Because systems like this don't export ideology, they export methods. Other governments don't need to agree with the politics. They only need to notice what worked, a blackout here, a delay there, a justification borrowed, a precedent quietly logged. Economic pressure responds slowly. Institutions debate language. International bodies issue statements that arrive after the moment has passed, and every hour of delay teaches the same lesson. Speed beats outrage. Markets adjust. Allies hedge. Trade reroutes. Life goes on, just altered enough to feel permanent. What was once unthinkable becomes discussable, then defensible, then repeatable. This is how a local crisis becomes a global template, not through conquest, through imitation. Because no system wants to be first, but many are willing to be second. And once the pattern spreads, there is no single border where it can be stopped. Only a narrowing window where response still matters. That window is closing now. And what comes next isn't reaction, it's acceleration into the future. From here, the future doesn't branch gently, it splits. There are 3 paths visible now. None of them are clean. The first is adjustment. Systems learn to respond faster. Connectivity hardens. Blackouts trigger automatic consequences. The cost of silence rises just enough to slow the machine, not stop it. Just slow it. The second is erosion. The method works too well. Responses stay delayed. Outrage burns out. The blackout model spreads quietly, unevenly. Violence doesn't increase. It becomes more efficient, more targeted, less visible. And then there is rupture. This is where the system miscalculates, where speed outruns control, where silence breaks unevenly, where leaks, defections, or external force collide with internal fear. Rupture doesn't look like revolution at first. It looks like confusion, like competing realities, like orders that arrive too late. Which path comes next is not decided by intent. It's decided by timing, by who adapts faster. The systems that suppress, or the systems meant to stop them. And that decision is being rehearsed right now. Because the most dangerous part of this story is that none of these futures are hypothetical anymore. This is not the end of the story. And that's the problem, because nothing here resolves itself. Not quietly, not on its own. What you've been watching is a system proving a capability, not making an argument, not asking permission. A demonstration, it shows how quickly reality can be reshaped. When silence is engineered and response arrives late, and now that demonstration exists, recorded, studied, replicably. The danger isn't that this happened once, it's that it worked well enough to be remembered. If you're waiting for closure, you won't get it here. There is no verdict yet, no final tally, no moment where the tension releases. There is only a question hanging in the air. How many systems are quietly preparing to do this next? Faster, cleaner, with fewer mistakes? If you want to understand where power is actually moving, this is the thread to pull. Stay with this. Follow the next chapter, because the next time the lights go out, it won't feel unprecedented. It will feel practiced, and that's when this story becomes unavoidable.